The courtroom was packed that Tuesday afternoon, every seat taken, every eye fixed forward. The air felt heavier than usual, like the room itself knew something was about to break. Judge Judy Sheindlin sat behind the bench, her glasses perched low on her nose, her expression carved from stone. She had seen everything in her decades on the bench. Liars, cheats, con artists, people who thought they could walk into her courtroom and spin their stories like silk. But today was different. Today, a man in a pressed suit sat at the defendant's table, his jaw tight, his hands folded in front of him like he was sitting in church. His name was Officer Derek Hale, and 6 months ago, he had been one of the most respected patrol officers in his precinct. He had commendations. He had awards. He had a badge that gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and he had walked into this courtroom believing that badge would be enough to save him. It would not. The plaintiff was a woman named Maria Sandoval, 34 years old, a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over her kids' heads. She sat on the other side of the courtroom in a simple blouse, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Next to her sat her attorney, a young public defender named Christine Park, who looked like she hadn't slept in 3 days but whose eyes burned with the kind of fire that only comes when you know you're on the right side of something. Judge Judy looked between them, then opened the file in front of her. She read silently for a long moment. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the back wall. Then she looked up. "Mrs. Sandoval, you are suing Officer Derek Hale for damages to your vehicle, emotional distress, and harassment. You claim that on the night of March 14th, Officer Hale conducted an unlawful traffic stop, damaged your car, and subjected you to verbal abuse and intimidation. Is that correct?" Maria nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Judy turned her gaze to the defendant's table. "Officer Hale, you deny all of these allegations. You state in your filing that the traffic stop was lawful, that Mrs. Sandoval was uncooperative and belligerent, and that any damage to her vehicle was pre-existing. Is that your position?" Derek Hale straightened his tie and looked the judge dead in the eye. "That is correct, Your Honor. I was performing my duties as a sworn officer of the law. Everything I did that night was by the book." Judge Judy stared at him for a long moment. She didn't blink. She didn't nod. She just stared. Then she said, "We'll see about that." She turned to Maria. "Tell me what happened." Maria took a breath. Her attorney gave her a small nod of encouragement. Then she began. "It was about 9:30 at night. I was driving home from my second job. I work at a restaurant in the evenings and I had just finished a double shift. My kids were at home with my mother. I was tired, but I was driving carefully. I always drive carefully because I can't afford a ticket and I can't afford to lose my license." She paused, collecting herself. "I was on Elm Street about 2 blocks from my house. There was no one else on the road. Then I saw lights behind me, red and blue. I pulled over immediately. I put my car in park. I turned on my interior light. I put my hands on the steering wheel. I did everything you're supposed to do." Judge Judy was watching her intently. "Go on." "The officer came to my window. He asked for my license and registration. I gave them to him. He looked at them and then he said my tail light was out. I told him I didn't know, that I would get it fixed right away. He went back to his car. He was gone for a long time, maybe 10 minutes. Then he came back." Maria's voice began to shake. "When he came back, he told me to step out of the car. I asked why. He said he needed to search my vehicle. I asked if I had done something wrong. He said, 'Don't make this difficult.' I was scared, but I got out. He told me to stand by the back of the car. Then he started searching the inside." She wiped her eyes. "He was rough with everything. He opened my glove compartment and threw things on the floor. He pulled out the floor mats. He looked under the seats. He opened the trunk. I had groceries in there that I had picked up on my break, and he moved them all around and some of them fell on the ground. A carton of eggs broke." "Did he find anything?" Judge Judy asked. "No, there was nothing to find. I don't do drugs. I don't carry weapons. I'm a mother. I work. I go home. That's my life." What happened after the search? He came back to where I was standing. He seemed angry, like he was disappointed he didn't find anything. And then he said something I will never forget. The courtroom leaned forward. He said, "Next time don't give me attitude or it'll be worse." I hadn't given him any attitude. I had been polite the entire time. I was terrified. Then he got in his car and left. But before he left, he kicked my rear bumper. Hard. It cracked the bumper cover. I heard it crack. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. "He kicked your car?" "Yes, Your Honor. And when I went to file a complaint the next day at the precinct, the desk officer told me that Officer Hale had already filed a report saying I was belligerent and uncooperative during the stop. He said I had been verbally abusive and that he had reason to believe I was under the influence, which is why he searched the car. None of that is true. None of it." Judge Judy turned to Officer Hale. "Your response?" Hale leaned forward with practiced confidence. He had clearly done this before, sat in rooms where his word was being questioned, and talked his way through it. "Your Honor, with all due respect to Mrs. Sandoval, her account is inaccurate. I observed her vehicle weaving slightly as it traveled down Elm Street. When I initiated the stop, she was slow to pull over, which raised my suspicion. When I approached the vehicle, I detected a faint odor that I believed could be consistent with marijuana. That gave me probable cause to conduct a search." "Did you find any marijuana?" Judge Judy asked. "No, ma'am, but the odor was present." "The odor was present, but there was no marijuana." "That's correct. It's possible the odor was residual." Judge Judy tilted her head. "Residual from what?" "From a previous occupant of the vehicle, perhaps. Or it could have dissipated by the time I conducted the search." "So you're telling me you smelled something that wasn't there?" "I'm telling you I smelled something that gave me probable cause at the time of the stop." Judge Judy stared at him again with that look, the one that had made hundreds of people squirm in that same chair. "And the bumper, she says you kicked her car." Hale shook his head. "That never happened. As I stated in my report, the damage to her bumper was pre-existing. I noted it when I first approached the vehicle." "You noted pre-existing damage to her rear bumper when you approached from behind?" "Yes, ma'am. It's part of my training to observe the condition of a vehicle during a stop." "And yet you didn't include that observation in your initial report. I've read it. There's no mention of pre-existing damage." Hale paused. It was a small pause, barely a heartbeat, but in Judge Judy's courtroom, a pause like that was a confession. "I may have omitted that detail, but—" "You may have omitted it. Interesting. What else did you omit?" "Nothing, Your Honor. My report is accurate." Judge Judy closed the file. She took off her glasses and set them on the bench. Then she said 5 words that changed everything. "I want to see the Bodycam." The color drained from Derek Hale's face. Not all at once. It happened slowly, like watching a tide go out. His attorney, a well-dressed man named Richard Foley who had been sitting silently beside him, leaned over and whispered something. Hale shook his head. Foley whispered again, more urgently. Hale's jaw tightened. Judge Judy watched this exchange with the patience of a predator. "Is there a problem, Mr. Foley?" Foley stood up. "Your Honor, we were under the impression that the Bodycam footage was not available. Officer Hale's department informed us that there was a malfunction with the recording equipment on the night in question." Judge Judy turned to Christine Park. "Ms. Park, do you have the Bodycam footage?" Christine Park stood up, and for the first time that day, the hint of a smile crossed her face. "Yes, Your Honor. We obtained the footage through a public records request. The department initially told us the footage was corrupted, but we persisted. After filing a formal appeal, we received the complete, unedited recording 3 weeks ago." She held up a USB drive. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Judy silenced them with a single look. "Play it." A monitor was wheeled to the front of the courtroom. The bailiff connected the drive. The screen flickered to life. The footage was grainy in the way Bodycam footage always is, slightly fish-eyed, the colors washed out by the camera's night mode. But it was clear, painfully clear. The timestamp read March 14, 9:37 p.m. The footage showed the view from Officer Hale's chest-mounted camera as he sat in his patrol car. Through the windshield, you could see a dark sedan driving ahead of him on Elm Street. The car was driving in a perfectly straight line. There was no weaving. There was no erratic behavior. The car signaled a turn, slowed down, and proceeded normally. Judge Judy paused the footage. "Officer Hale, you testified that you observed the vehicle weaving. Is this the vehicle?" Hale was staring at the screen. "Yes." "Show me the weaving." Silence. "I can't see any weaving, officer, can you?" "It may have occurred before the camera angle captured it. The footage shows you following this vehicle for nearly 3 blocks before you initiated the stop. 3 blocks of straight, normal driving. Let's continue." The footage resumed. Hale activated his lights. The sedan pulled over within seconds, smoothly, to the right side of the road. It came to a complete stop. The interior light came on. You could see through the rear window that the driver had placed her hands on the steering wheel. Hale exited his vehicle and approached. When he reached the driver's window, the camera captured Maria Sandoval's face. She looked tired. She looked nervous, but she was calm. Her hands were still on the wheel. "Good evening. License and registration, please." "Yes, sir, here you go." Her voice on the recording was steady and polite. She handed the documents through the window without hesitation. Hale took them and walked back to his car. The footage showed him sitting in his patrol car for nearly 12 minutes. 12 minutes. During that time, he was on his radio, but the audio was muffled. Then he went back to her car. "Step out of the vehicle." "May I ask why, sir?" "I need to search your car. Step out." "Did I do something wrong? Is it the tail light?" "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask you again." Maria got out. She was wearing her restaurant uniform, a black polo shirt and black pants. She stood where he told her to stand by the rear of the car, her arms crossed against the cold. Then Hale began searching the car. The courtroom watched in silence as the bodycam recorded everything. He opened the glove compartment and emptied it. Papers, napkins, a small flashlight, a pack of tissues. He threw them on the passenger seat and floor. He pulled up the floor mats. He reached under the seats. He opened the center console. He found nothing. He moved to the trunk. He popped it open. Inside were 2 bags of groceries and a jacket. He rifled through the bags, pulling items out and setting them on the ground. A carton of eggs fell and cracked open on the pavement. He didn't pick them up. He moved the jacket and felt around the trunk lining. Nothing. He slammed the trunk shut. Then came the part that made the courtroom hold its breath. Hale walked back toward Maria. The camera caught his face in partial profile, and his expression was one of undisguised frustration. He stopped in front of her. "Next time, don't give me attitude, or it'll be a lot worse." The audio was crystal clear. There was no ambiguity. There was no context that could soften those words. Maria's voice came through the speakers, small and shaking. "I didn't give you any attitude, sir." Hale didn't respond. He turned and walked back toward his patrol car. But as he passed the rear of her sedan, he stopped. He looked at the bumper. And then, clearly, unmistakably, he drew his right leg back and kicked the bumper. The sound of cracking plastic was audible on the recording. He looked at the damage for a moment, then continued walking to his car and drove away. The footage ended. The courtroom was completely silent. Judge Judy sat motionless for what felt like an eternity. Then she turned to Officer Hale. "Officer Hale, would you like to revise your testimony?" Hale was staring at the table in front of him. His attorney was scribbling furiously on a notepad, though it was hard to imagine what he could possibly be writing that would help. "Officer Hale, I asked you a question." Hale looked up. His face was tight, his eyes hard, but beneath the hardness there was something else. Fear. Your Honor, You told me under oath that Mrs. Sandoval was weaving. The footage shows she was driving in a straight line. You told me you smelled marijuana. Looking at that footage, I saw a woman who cooperated fully and immediately. You told me she was belligerent. The footage shows her being more polite to you than you deserved. You told me the damage to her bumper was pre-existing. The footage shows you kicking her car like a child throwing a tantrum, and you told me your report was accurate. Your report was a work of fiction. She leaned forward. You know what I think, Officer Hale? I think you pulled over a woman who was driving home from work, minding her own business because you had nothing better to do. I think you searched her car hopping to find something, anything that would justify the stop. And when you came up empty, when you realized you had wasted your time and hers, instead of apologizing, instead of admitting you made a mistake, you threatened her. You damaged her property. And then you went back to your precinct and wrote a report full of lies to cover yourself. She picked up the file and held it up. This report, this piece of fiction, do you know what this is? This is a weapon. When you file a false report, you are using the power of your badge to rewrite reality. You are turning a lie into an official record. And if Mrs. Sandoval hadn't had the courage to come into this courtroom, if her attorney hadn't fought to get that footage, your version of events would be the truth. Your lies would be the record. And this woman, this hardworking mother, would be the one with a mark on her name. Judge Judy's voice had been rising steadily, and now it filled the entire courtroom like thunder. You are everything that is wrong with the system when it fails. A badge is not a shield for bad behavior. It is a responsibility. It is a promise to the people you serve that you will treat them with fairness and respect. You broke that promise. She paused and took a breath. I'm going to ask you one more time. Look at Mrs. Sandoval, look at her. Hale slowly turned his head. Maria was sitting perfectly still, tears running silently down her face. Not dramatic tears, not performative tears. The quiet tears of a woman who had spent months wondering if anyone would believe her, and who had just watched a room full of strangers see the truth. Do you have anything to say to her? Hale opened his mouth, then he closed it, then he looked down at the table. I thought not, Judge Judy said. She turned to Maria. Mrs. Sandoval, I want to say something to you. What happened to you on the night of March 14th was wrong. It was a violation of your rights, your dignity, and your trust in the people who are supposed to protect you. You did everything right that night. Everything. You pulled over. You turned on your light. You put your hands on the wheel. You were polite. You cooperated. And you were still treated like a criminal. Maria nodded, wiping her eyes. I am awarding you the full amount you are seeking for damages to your vehicle and for emotional distress. And I want to strongly recommend that the relevant authorities review this bodycam footage and take appropriate action regarding Officer Hale's conduct and the filing of a false police report. She brought down her gavel. The sound cracked through the courtroom like a gunshot. But the story didn't end there, not even close. What happened in Judge Judy's courtroom that day set off a chain of events that no one, not Officer Hale, not his department, not even Judge Judy herself, could have fully predicted. The footage went public. Christine Park, Maria's attorney, had obtained permission to release it, and within hours of the ruling it was everywhere. Local news stations picked it up first. Then it hit social media. Then national outlets. Within 48 hours, the clip of Judge Judy saying, "A badge is not a shield for bad behavior," had been viewed over 20 million times. The reaction was immediate and fierce. People were outraged, not just by what Hale had done, but by what his department had tried to do afterward. The fact that the bodycam footage had initially been reported as corrupted raised enormous questions. Who had made that determination? Was it a genuine technical error, or had someone deliberately tried to bury the evidence? The police chief held a press conference 3 days after the ruling. He stood behind a podium with the department's seal and spoke in the careful, measured language of a man who knew he was standing on thin ice. We take these allegations very seriously. We have launched an internal investigation into the conduct of Officer Hale and the handling of the bodycam footage. We hold our officers to the highest standards, and any deviation from those standards will be addressed. But the public wasn't buying it. The investigation had only started because the footage had gone viral. If Maria had never filed her lawsuit, if Christine Park had never fought for the footage, if Judge Judy had never played it in open court, Derek Hale would still be on patrol. He would still be pulling people over. He would still be writing reports. How many other reports had he written? That question became the next chapter of the story. A local investigative journalist named David Chen began digging into Hale's history. What he found was disturbing. Over the past 5 years, Hale had conducted an unusually high number of traffic stops that resulted in vehicle searches. The vast majority of those searches turned up nothing. But in nearly every case, Hale's reports described the drivers as uncooperative, hostile, or exhibiting signs of impairment. The pattern was unmistakable. Chen interviewed 7 other people who had been stopped by Hale. Their stories were remarkably similar to Maria's. A late-night stop for a minor infraction, an extended wait while Hale sat in his patrol car, a demand to search the vehicle, and when nothing was found, a curt dismissal and sometimes a threat. One of those people was a retired schoolteacher named Gerald Thompson, 68 years old, who had been stopped by Hale 2 years earlier while driving home from a church event. Hale had told him his brake light was out. It wasn't. Hale had searched his car and found nothing. Gerald had filed a complaint, but it had gone nowhere. The department had ruled the stop as justified based on Hale's report. "I knew he was lying," Gerald told Chen in an interview. "But what could I do? It was my word against a police officer's. Nobody was going to believe me." Another person Chen found was a 22-year-old college student named Aisha Brown. She had been stopped by Hale while driving to her campus apartment. Hale had claimed she ran a stop sign. She insisted she hadn't. He searched her car and found nothing. But the stop had lasted nearly 45 minutes, and by the time it was over, Aisha was shaking so badly she had to sit in her car for another 20 minutes before she could drive. "I didn't file a complaint," Aisha said. "I was scared. I thought if I made a fuss, he'd come after me. I just wanted to forget it happened." Story after story, person after person, and in every case the pattern held. Hale would make a stop based on a minor or fabricated infraction, search the vehicle, find nothing, and file a report that painted the driver as the problem. The internal investigation expanded. The department brought in an outside review board, partly because of public pressure, and partly because the chief realized his own people couldn't credibly investigate themselves anymore. The review board subpoenaed Hale's bodycam footage for the past 3 years. What they found was even worse than what had been revealed in court. In multiple instances, the footage directly contradicted Hale's written reports. Drivers he described as hostile were calm and cooperative. Infractions he cited as the basis for stops were nowhere to be seen on the recordings. And in 2 cases, the footage showed Hale turning off his bodycam during the middle of a stop, which was a direct violation of department policy. The question everyone was asking was obvious. How had this gone on for so long? How had no one noticed? The answer when it came was uncomfortable. People had noticed. Complaints had been filed. But the system was designed, whether intentionally or not, to protect its own. When a civilian filed a complaint against an officer, the complaint was investigated by other officers in the same department. The officer's report was given the presumption of accuracy. The civilian's word was treated with skepticism. And without hard evidence like bodycam footage, the complaints almost always went nowhere. Hale had benefited from this system his entire career. His badge wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a fortress, and it had protected him right up until the moment Judge Judy pressed play on that monitor. 6 weeks after the courtroom ruling, the review board released its findings. Derek Hale had committed multiple violations of department policy and civil rights statutes. He was terminated from the force. The district attorney's office announced that it was reviewing several of his past cases and considering charges for filing false police reports, which in that jurisdiction was a felony. But the ripple effects went further than one officer. The review board's investigation had uncovered systemic problems in how the department handled bodycam footage. Storage protocols were inconsistent. Officers had too much discretion over when cameras were turned on and off. Footage that should have been preserved was routinely deleted after short retention periods. And the process for responding to public records requests was so slow and convoluted that most people gave up before ever getting the footage they were entitled to. The department was forced to overhaul its entire bodycam program. New policies were implemented. Cameras would now be required to be on during all interactions with the public. Officers would no longer have the ability to turn them off manually during stops. Footage would be stored on independent servers with longer retention periods, and public records requests would be handled by a civilian oversight office rather than by the department itself. Christine Park, the attorney who had fought for the footage, became something of a local hero. She was invited to speak at legal conferences and community events. She used her platform to advocate for broader reforms, including independent civilian review boards, mandatory bodycam requirements for all departments, and stronger penalties for officers who filed false reports. But it was Maria Sandoval who became the face of the story. Not because she wanted to be. She didn't. She was a private person who had just wanted her bumper fixed and an acknowledgement that what happened to her was wrong. But her quiet dignity in that courtroom, the way she had told her story without embellishment or drama, the way she had sat with tears on her face while the truth played out on a screen for everyone to see, that had resonated with millions of people. Maria received letters from all over the country, from people who had been through similar experiences, from people who had filed complaints that went nowhere, from people who had been too scared to file complaints at all. She read every single one. In an interview months later, Maria was asked what she wanted people to take away from her experience. "I want people to know that it's worth it," she said. "I was so scared to come forward. I thought nobody would believe me. I thought they would say I was making it up or that I must have done something wrong. But I knew the truth, and I decided that the truth was worth fighting for. Not just for me, but for my kids. I want them to grow up in a world where the truth matters, where you can't just lie and get away with it because you have a badge." She paused, then added, "And I want to thank Judge Judy. She didn't just listen to me, she believed me. And then she made everyone else see what really happened. That's all I ever wanted, for someone to see." As for Derek Hale, he did not go quietly. He gave one interview to a sympathetic media outlet in which he claimed he was being made an example of, that the system had thrown him under the bus to avoid broader scrutiny. He hired a private attorney and fought his termination. He lost. 8 months after the courtroom ruling, he was charged with 3 counts of filing false official documents. He pleaded not guilty and awaited trial. The trial, when it came, was anticlimactic compared to the drama of Judge Judy's courtroom. The evidence was overwhelming. The bodycam footage from multiple stops was played. His own reports were read aloud and compared to what the cameras showed. Witness after witness took the stand and told stories that were nearly identical to Maria's. Hale's defense attorney tried to argue that the discrepancies between the reports and the footage were the result of honest mistakes, the fog of memory, the stress of the job, the difficulty of accurately recalling details after a long shift. It was a reasonable argument in theory, but it fell apart under the weight of the pattern. 1 mistake was understandable, 2 was concerning, a dozen was a system of deception. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found Derek Hale guilty on all 3 counts. At sentencing, the judge, a different judge this time, addressed Hale directly. "Officer Hale, you were entrusted with extraordinary power. The power to stop people, to search them, to detain them, to alter the course of their lives with the stroke of a pen. That power comes with an obligation to tell the truth. You violated that obligation repeatedly and deliberately. You used your authority not to serve the public but to serve yourself, your convenience, your ego, your unwillingness to admit when you were wrong. The damage you have done extends far beyond the individuals you wronged. You have damaged the trust that every officer in your department depends on to do their job. You have made the work of good officers harder. And you have confirmed the worst fears of every person who has ever been pulled over and wondered whether the officer approaching their window was someone they could trust. Hale was sentenced to 18 months in prison and permanently barred from serving in law enforcement. The story made national headlines one more time, and then, as stories do, it faded from the front pages. New scandals emerged. New outrages captured the public's attention. The news cycle moved on. But the changes remained. The Bodycam reforms that were implemented in Hale's department became a model for departments across the state. Legislation was introduced requiring all law enforcement agencies receiving state funding to adopt similar protocols. It passed. Christine Park continued her work, representing clients who couldn't afford representation, fighting for transparency, pushing for accountability. She never became famous. She didn't want to be. But in the legal community, her name became synonymous with a particular kind of tenacity, the kind that doesn't give up when a record's request is denied, the kind that files the appeal and then files another one. Gerald Thompson, the retired schoolteacher, had his complaint reopened and sustained. He received a formal apology from the department. He framed it and hung it on his wall next to his teaching certificate. Aisha Brown went on to graduate from college and enrolled in law school. She said Maria's story had inspired her. And Maria Sandoval fixed her bumper. She continued working her 2 jobs. She came home to her kids every night and helped them with their homework and made sure they ate dinner and got to bed on time. She lived a quiet life, the kind of life that doesn't make headlines, the kind of life that is extraordinary precisely because of how ordinary it is. But sometimes, late at night, after the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, she would sit at her kitchen table and think about that courtroom. She would think about the moment the footage played and the whole room went silent. She would think about Judge Judy's voice, sharp and clear and righteous, cutting through the lies like a blade. She would think about the look on Derek Hale's face when the truth caught up with him. And she would think about what she had told the interviewer. For someone to see. That's what she had wanted. Not revenge, not fame, not money, just for someone to see. And in the end, everyone did. The courtroom had emptied that day like any other, people filing out through the double doors, the bailiff collecting papers, the court reporter packing up her machine. Judge Judy had gathered her files and stepped down from the bench. She didn't give interviews about individual cases. She didn't comment to the press. She went back to her chambers and prepared for the next case. Because that's what judges do. They hear the evidence, they weigh the truth, and they rule. And then they move on. There is always another case, another dispute, another person standing in front of the bench hopping to be heard. But some cases stay with you. Some cases remind you why the bench exists in the first place, why courtrooms have rules, why evidence matters, why the truth, the actual, verifiable, recorded truth, is the most powerful thing in any legal system. A badge is a symbol of authority, but authority without accountability is just power, and power without accountability is just tyranny wearing a uniform. Judge Judy understood that. She had always understood that. It was written in every sharp question she asked, every lie she dismantled, every bluff she called. Her courtroom was not a place where titles or uniforms or carefully worded reports could substitute for the truth. In her courtroom, the truth was the only currency that mattered. And on that Tuesday afternoon, in a packed courtroom with the cameras rolling and the world eventually watching, the truth had won. Not because it always does. It doesn't. There are countless Maria Sandovals whose stories are never heard, whose complaints are filed away and forgotten, whose encounters with people like Derek Hale become nothing more than a bad memory they carry alone. But on that day, for that woman in that courtroom, the truth won. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything.